The snow had been falling since 4 in the afternoon. By 9 o'clock at night, it lay thick and deliberate against the glass tower on the edge of downtown Hartford, Connecticut. The kind of snow that made the city forget itself, made everything soft and white and quiet. Inside the building on the 8th floor, Victoria Hargrove stood in the hallway outside the tutoring room with a printed report in her hand. She had been holding it for 11 minutes. She knew this because she had checked her phone 6 times in those 11 minutes. Each time it told her something different, which made no sense, because the numbers on the paper didn't change. Ranked 41st, ranked 47th. Her twin sons, Marcus and David, both 11 years old, both supposed to be the kind of children who exceeded expectations, both currently failing to do so. The qualifying test was 3 weeks away. The cutoff for advancement was the top 15. This was not a suggestion. This was a fact. And facts in Victoria's experience were the only thing you could actually control. She knocked once and didn't wait for an answer. The room smelled like cold coffee and pencil shavings, and the particular staleness of a room where nothing was working. Marcus sat closest to the door, dark-haired, the one who cried less but carried things longer. David was by the window watching the snow, with the expression of a boy who had already given up. Their tutor, Preston, a young man with a Yale degree and a subscription to 3 different test prep services, was scrolling through something on his laptop when she entered. Preston stood. The boys didn't move. Victoria set the paper on the table without introduction. The paper made a flat, final sound. She was looking at her sons, not at Preston, and what she saw in their faces was something she recognized. It was the look of people who had already decided they couldn't do something. She had seen that look before. It was the same look she saw in the mirror sometimes, when she thought about the fact that her husband had died 11 years ago, and she still hadn't figured out how to be both a mother and a CEO. If they're not in the top 20 by the qualifier, we're reassessing everything. She said it quietly, not a threat. Just information. Everything. Neither boy answered. Marcus looked at the table. David kept looking at the snow. Which was, Victoria told herself as she turned to leave, answer enough. She had a call with Singapore in 30 minutes. She did not look back. Preston packed up at 9:15. He was professional about it. He left a stack of worksheets that neither boy touched. The moment the door clicked shut, David let out a breath like a balloon deflating. "I hate this." David said it flat. Marcus didn't answer. He picked up his pencil and stared at the first problem. A word problem about train schedules. He read it 3 times and understood nothing. The words kept rearranging themselves. He wondered if this was what his brain actually did, if it was broken in some way that couldn't be fixed. "I can't do this stuff," Marcus said finally. "Me neither," David said. "Then what do we do?" David looked at the window. The snow was heavier now. The city outside had become a whisper of itself. "I don't know," David said. "Nothing." They sat like that for 20 minutes. The worksheets didn't get any shorter. The snow kept falling. At some point, Marcus put his head down on the table, and David heard the small, unsteady sound of his brother trying not to cry. David didn't cry. He just felt hollow. He felt like the kind of person who would never be good at anything that mattered. That was when the door opened. Not wide, just enough for a mop head to come through first. Then a bucket on wheels, the kind that sloshed quietly. Then a man, medium height, wearing gray work clothes with a patch that said Building Services. He was maybe in his late 30s, with brown hair going slightly gray at the temples, and the careful, quiet movements of someone who had learned how to move through spaces that weren't his. He stopped when he saw them. "Sorry," he said. thought the room was empty. Marcus lifted his head. His eyes were red. He looked embarrassed about it, and then angry at being embarrassed. "It's fine," David said. "You can clean the room." The man's name tag said James. He nodded and started moving toward the far corner, the way he'd probably moved through 1,000 other rooms in this building. He was halfway through wiping down the baseboard when he glanced at the table. He saw the untouched worksheets. He saw the pencil Marcus had set down like a surrender. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, without stopping his work, he said, "Rough night." Neither boy answered. "Qualifiers," James said, still wiping the baseboard, not looking at them, still not looking at the worksheets or the boy's red eyes. "Westfield." David frowned. "You know about it?" "Seen the posters in the lobby," James said. A pause. "How's that going?" "We're going to fail," Marcus said. He said it flat, the way you say something when you've stopped feeling bad about it and started treating it as simple fact. "We're ranked 40-something. You have to be in the top 15, and we're stupid." James finished the corner and straightened up. He looked at the worksheets. He looked at the boys. There was something in his expression that was harder to name than sympathy. Something quieter. Something like recognition. Something like he had seen this particular moment before. In a different life. A different version of himself. "Which one's giving you trouble?" he said. Marcus pointed at the train problem. James walked over, not fast, and looked at it. He read it carefully. Then he said, "Forget the trains." David blinked. "What?" "Forget the trains," James said. "That framing doesn't help anyone. Let me ask you something. You ever been sledding?" Marcus looked at his brother. David looked at James. "Yeah," Marcus said slowly. "Last winter. There's a hill near our house." "Okay," James said. He pulled out the chair where Preston usually sat and turned it around backward, straddling it with his arms folded on the back. "Two guys at the top of the same hill. One of them starts at 8 in the morning. The other starts an hour later. But he's got a faster sled. When does the second guy catch up?" The boys stared at him. James picked up Marcus's pencil. He turned the worksheet over to the blank side. He drew 2 small figures at the top of a slope. The drawing was simple. Just stick figures and a line representing distance. But something about the simplicity made both boys lean forward without meaning to. "It's the same question," James said. "Trains, sleds, cars. It doesn't matter. What matters is 2 things moving. Different starting points. One is faster. When do they meet?" He tapped the drawing with the pencil. "Your brain already knows how to think about sleds," James said. "So use that. You know hills. You know what it feels like when someone's going faster than you. So forget about trains. What about the sled guy? How much ground does he cover before the other guy even starts?" Marcus picked up his own pencil. He thought about it. He wrote a number, then another, then very carefully a third. He stared at it. "They meet after," he said, then calculated silently. "After the second guy has been going for 2 hours." James said nothing, just watched. Marcus checked it again. The answer was right. He could feel it, the way a piece slots into a puzzle. A small, clean click. "That's it," David said, looking over his shoulder. "That's the train problem." "Same structure, different clothes," James said. The boys looked at each other, then at the worksheet. Then David grabbed a pencil and went to the next question. Another word problem, this one about a factory. And before James had even finished moving to the next section of the room, David had rewritten the problem in his head as a race between 2 fishing boats in a frozen harbor. He had the answer in 4 minutes. At 9:45, Victoria walked past the conference room on her way back from her call. She glanced through the glass panel in the door and stopped. James was back in the corner mopping. The boys were working, both of them. Marcus's pencil was moving fast and steady. David was writing carefully, checking his work, looking almost like he might understand something. Victoria watched for 30 seconds without moving. Then she continued to her car. But something had shifted in her thinking. She had spent the entire Singapore call thinking about her sons' faces when she set down that report. The way they had looked at each other, like two people sharing the knowledge that they were drowning. She didn't sleep well that night. She kept thinking about something the notary public had said to her years ago, after she signed the custody papers. The woman had looked at Victoria and said, "The hard part isn't being a mother when things are going well. The hard part is being a mother when you don't know what to do." And Victoria had thought at the time that the notary was wrong. That knowing what to do was the whole point of working this hard, achieving this much, building this company. That if she just succeeded enough, she wouldn't have to face the situation where she didn't know what to do. But sitting in her bed, unable to sleep, looking at the photograph on her nightstand, a picture of Marcus and David at age 5, both gap-toothed and earnest, she understood that she had been wrong. She had been desperately, fundamentally wrong. The next morning, she found James in the second-floor hallway, changing out fluorescent lights. "Excuse me," she said. He turned from his ladder. "I want to understand what you did with my sons last night," she said. James came down the ladder slowly. He was quiet for a moment. "I didn't do anything," he said. "I just helped them see that the problem they were scared of was the same problem they already understood. They just needed different clothes for it." Victoria heard the layers in this, understood he was offering her more than information about math. "Where did you learn that?" she said. "Graduate school," James said. "I had a professor who believed understanding mattered more than speed, who said that the moment you stopped being afraid of a problem was the moment you could actually solve it." Why don't more people believe that, Victoria asked. "Because speed is easier to measure," James said, "and we're obsessed with what we can measure." Victoria felt this land, understood that he was talking about her, about how she had spent 9 years measuring everything and everyone around her, including her own children, including herself. "Do you still teach?" she asked. "I don't teach in a classroom," James said. "I work here, change lights, mop floors, make sure the building doesn't fall apart." "Why not?" Victoria said. James looked away. "My daughter's mother got sick when my daughter was 3. I had to choose between pursuing my career or actually being present for my daughter. I picked my daughter. That was 6 years ago." Victoria heard the weight in his voice, the way sacrifice sounds when you're carrying it. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Every day," James said, "and not at all." Victoria understood that both things were possible, that you could regret your sacrifice and know it was the right choice simultaneously. "Thank you," she said, "for what you did, for how you see my sons." James put the ladder away. "I see them the way my daughter sees me," he said, "like they already have everything they need, like they just need someone to help them see it." For the next 2 weeks, Victoria changed things. She didn't announce it. She just changed how she showed up. She came to tutoring sessions and sat in the corner just watching, learning how James taught, how he asked questions instead of providing answers, how he never rushed, how he treated a misunderstanding not as failure, but as information about what they needed. One evening, while the boys were working, she left the room and drove to the grocery store. She bought ingredients for her son's favorite meal, something she hadn't made in 2 years, because cooking took time, and time was something she didn't have. But she made it that night, and her sons came downstairs and found her in the kitchen. And David's face changed in a way that broke her heart a little, because he was surprised that his mother had time for him. The night before the qualifier, Victoria did something she had never done. She told her assistant that she was out, that she was not available, that nothing, absolutely nothing, was more important than what was happening that night. And she sat with her sons at the kitchen table and said, "I've been doing this wrong." Marcus looked up from his milk. "I've been measuring you against a standard that I created because I was afraid," Victoria said. "Because your father died, and I thought if I could just control enough things, I could prevent anything else from being lost. And I lost you instead, both of you. So that's done. From now on, I'm measuring differently." "What are you measuring now?" David asked. "Whether you're okay," she said. "Whether you know that you're loved. Whether you understand that trying is enough. Whether you believe that you matter. That's what I'm measuring." Neither boy said anything. Then Marcus reached across the table and took his mother's hand. David did the same, and they sat like that, the three of them, holding on to each other, and nobody said anything, because sometimes there's nothing to say. The next morning on Saturday, the qualifier happened in a quiet room at a testing center. Marcus and David sat down at tables with pencils and erasers and a problem set that would determine, they thought, whether they were smart enough. What they didn't know was that something had already changed. Their mother had already changed. The way they understood themselves had already shifted. The test was now just a test, not a judgment of their entire worth. Marcus moved through the problems methodically. The sled guy, the fishing boats, the two runners. Each problem shifted shape until the structure revealed itself. Two things moving, different starting points. One, faster. When do they meet? Same problem, different clothes. He finished with 20 minutes to spare and checked his work once and knew he'd done it right. David struggled more, sat frozen on one problem in the middle section, wanted to give up. But then he remembered how James had just sat with him, how he'd never made David feel like the struggling was a failure. So David sat with the problem. He tried another angle, and the problem opened. When they left the testing room, both boys were exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the 2 hours they'd spent there. David looked at his brother. "That was hard," David said. "Yeah," Marcus said. "Do you think we'll place?" "I have no idea," Marcus said, which was the truth. They didn't talk about the qualifier for 3 days. Their mother didn't ask. She just showed up. She picked them up from school. She made dinner. She asked about their day and actually listened. She was learning how to be present, and it was harder than building a company. And she was terrible at it, but she was trying. When the email came on Wednesday afternoon, Marcus was the one who opened it. He read it. He read it again. He read it a third time. What David said. "First place," Marcus said. "I placed first in the entire state." David grabbed the phone, read it, looked for his own name, found it. 5th overall, 5th in the entire state. David felt 3 things at once: relief, pride, and something like shame that he hadn't beaten his brother, that his brother had beaten him, that he was second best even now. "Don't be stupid," Marcus said, because he knew his brother's face. "I placed first, you placed 5th, we both made it, we both did it." David heard something in his brother's voice that he'd never heard before. Genuine pride in David's achievement, unrelated to how it compared to Marcus's own. And David realized that his brother already understood something that their mother was learning. That love wasn't competitive. That success wasn't a pie where someone had to eat less for someone else to eat more. Marcus called their mother. His voice was steady until he got to first place. And then something cracked open in his chest, and he had to press his lips together and breathe through his nose for a moment. "Your mother got the notification," Marcus said. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Yes," she said. "I got it. How do you feel?" Not "what are you going to do with this?" Not "that's wonderful." But "how do you feel?" Marcus realized that he had never been asked this question before. Not once in his entire life. "Like I can breathe," he said. "Yeah," his mother said quietly. "That's what I thought you'd say." David took the phone from his brother. "I placed fifth," he said. Their mother was quiet for a moment. "How does that feel?" she asked. "Like I matter," David said. "You have always mattered," his mother said. "But I'm sorry it took me this long to show you." On Monday morning, Victoria stood in the main conference room of Hargrove Holdings. 60 employees were seated waiting to hear about the company results, about quarterly projections, about whatever the CEO had to announce. The twins were seated in the front row. James was standing in the back. Victoria had asked him to come, had asked him to be present for this. "I'm not going to talk about the company today," Victoria said. "I'm going to talk about a man named James Webb and what he taught me." She told them briefly and honestly about her son's struggle, about the hour before the qualifying test, when neither boy believed they could succeed. She told them about James, who fixed broken things, not because he wanted credit, but because he couldn't stand to see something broken that he could fix. She told them what James had said in the parking garage, about how his daughter didn't need someone to look up to. She needed someone to look at her, actually see her. "And I've been building this company for 9 years, Victoria said. "I built it for my family, but I was building it instead of being with my family. Those are different things. They're completely different things." She paused. She looked at her sons. Marcus was watching her. David was watching her. Both of them understanding for the first time that their mother knew something important. "James Webb taught my sons how to solve problems," Victoria said. "But what he really taught them was that they were capable, that their brains worked fine, that they just needed a different angle of entry. And he taught me the same thing. He taught me that I'd been optimizing for the wrong outcome. I was optimizing for achievement. I should have been optimizing for presence, for actually being there, in the room, at the table, watching what's actually happening." She paused again. "This company will continue to succeed," she said. "But I'm stepping back as CEO for 6 months. I'm going to spend time with my sons. I'm going to learn how to be their mother in a way that doesn't require them to be perfect in order to be loved." The room was quiet. Victoria looked at James, who was standing in the back, and gave him a small nod. Then she left the podium and walked down to the front row and sat between her sons. 3 days after the public announcement, something else happened. Victoria met with James in the parking garage while he was changing lights. They stood in the concrete space surrounded by the infrastructure of the building, and they talked about what they could build. Something small. A learning center where the way James taught wasn't an exception, but the rule. Where children who learned differently could be seen clearly as they were, not as they weren't. "It's going to be a lot of work," Victoria said. "It is," James said. "And I'm not going to be good at it," Victoria said. "You won't be," James agreed. "But you'll show up. That's the whole thing." 2 years later, in a converted retail space on Wethersfield Avenue in Hartford, there was a learning center. The sign above the door said, Webb, Hargrove, Learning Initiative. Inside 12 tables, good lighting, a small library of mathematics books, and puzzles, and manipulatives. A separate room with softer lighting and noise-dampening panels for students who needed it. Lily Webb was 9 now. She came 3 afternoons a week, not as a student exactly. She was already reading at a level that didn't need remediation, but because she liked the patterns, the rhythms, the concentrated quiet of a room where everyone was working. She had a way of sitting beside struggling students without saying anything, just working alongside them, and somehow her presence helped. James suspected she had figured out something about attention, about what it felt like to be truly watched, that most people never learned. Marcus and David came on Saturdays. They were 13 now, past the intensity of the qualifier, past the particular crucible that had brought all of them into that conference room on a winter night. They came not because anyone asked them to, but because it had become the kind of place you returned to. Marcus worked with younger students on arithmetic using stories. Always stories. Always something with motion and consequence and a reason to care. Why does this number matter? What is it doing? David handled the puzzle section and had developed a talent for finding the one question that cracked a student's resistance open. The specific angle of entry that made everything make sense. He'd learned that from watching James. Victoria was a partner in the initiative financially and practically. She attended the Tuesday evening advisory meetings. She had become quietly and without announcement involved, making calls, arranging donations, sitting in on sessions occasionally. She was not good at it. She was learning. She showed up. Which James had come to believe was the whole thing. The entire secret. On the wall of the center's main room, there was a drawing framed in simple black wood. Not a photograph, not a certificate, but a drawing on the blank side of a worksheet. 2 stick figures at the top of a slope, a line marking the distance below them, a small notation in the margin that read, "Same problem, different clothes." Marcus had framed it himself the summer after the qualifier. He'd brought it in without asking and hung it between the clock and the window. Nobody had said anything about it. It had stayed. New students often asked about it. The answer was always, ask one of the Saturday kids. And the Saturday kids, Marcus or David, or occasionally Lily, who had developed her own compressed and precise way of explaining things, would tell the story. Not the whole story. Just the part about a winter night, a conference room, a man who stopped mopping long enough to ask if the night had been rough, the part about 2 figures on a hill and one question. When do they meet? One evening, about 8 months after the Learning Center opened, Victoria was there for an advisory meeting. She was sitting in the main room watching her sons work with younger students. Marcus was explaining to a boy who was struggling with fractions how to think of it as dividing a pizza. If you have 1 pizza and want to give half to a friend, you're not thinking about mathematics. You're thinking about fairness. David was sitting with a girl who was convinced she was stupid because she couldn't do long division in her head. David told her, "My mom used to think I was stupid, and then she realized that I just needed to think about problems differently. And now I'm in the top 5 students in my grade. So you're not stupid. You just haven't found the right way to think about it yet." The girl looked at David like he just handed her permission to be okay with being human. Victoria watched this happen, watched her son pass forward the gift that was given to him. She realized that she wasn't just watching her sons learn. She was watching them become teachers. She was watching them become the kind of adults who help other people see themselves clearly. James came and sat next to Victoria. He didn't say anything, just sat with her. Victoria said quietly, "Do you think we did this right, James? Did we do what right, Victoria? Teach them that they matter. Teach them that trying is enough." James was quiet for a moment. "Then you can never do it completely right. But you showed up. You changed when you needed to change. You're learning. That's the whole thing." Victoria said, "I still measure things sometimes. Sometimes I catch myself wanting them to be the best, wanting to make sure they're always winning." James, yeah. You probably always will. You're her. That's what she does. But now you know the difference between measuring achievement and measuring presence, and you choose presence more often. That's enough. Victoria felt something release in her chest. She'd been waiting for the moment when she'd be a perfect mother, when she'd completely transcend her need to measure and control. James was telling her that moment would never come. But that was okay. That was actually the whole point. You don't transcend your nature. You integrate it. You become aware of your patterns, and you choose differently sometimes. And you fail sometimes. And that's what being human is. She thought about James, who left a prestigious career to be present for his daughter, who sometimes probably missed academia, who probably sometimes wondered if he made the right choice. She saw the photograph on his desk, a woman named Claire, laughing, and a girl named Lily eating her mitten. Both of them gone now in different ways. Both of them the reason James was here, in this center, choosing presence every day. Victoria said, "Thank you for seeing my sons, for teaching them, for teaching me. James, thank you for making a space where this could happen, for choosing your kids. Not everyone does. This is the moment where two people coming from different places meeting through accident understand that they've built something that matters. Not because it's perfect, because it's real. Not because it fixes everything, because it begins the process of healing." Victoria looked at her sons working with younger students, at Lily sitting quietly present to a struggling student, at the drawing on the wall. She understood that this is what success actually looks like. Not achievement, transformation, not winning. Becoming the kind of person who helps others see their own capability. Not building an empire, building a place where people matter. The growth doesn't come from a test score or a ranking. It comes from this: a mother understanding her son, a son teaching kindness to another struggling kid, a man who gave up prestige, sitting beside a woman who gave up certainty. Both of them knowing they made the right choice, even though the choice cost them something. The Learning Center continued to grow. Victoria and James continued their partnership. It became a friendship, a genuine collaboration based on respect and shared values. Marcus and David graduated from being Saturday kids who helped out to becoming junior instructors. They were paid small stipends to teach younger students. Lily, as she got older, became drawn to education as a career. She wanted to work with students who learned differently. James still kept a photograph in his left breast pocket and took it out sometimes before difficult moments, remembering what he was building toward. Success isn't what you earn. It's what you find when you stop running past the people who need you to slow down.